Today, we are going to look at the harmonic progression commonly known as the 12-bar blues. And while the blues is often associated with R&B music and jazz, there are harmonic devices and techniques in the blues that can be used in music of almost every genre. We won't be looking at the blues scale. That is a device that allows a performer to play a solo or a melody over the progression, and often without understanding the function of the underlying chords. No, instead, we will focus on the chords themselves. In its most basic form, the 12-bar blues looks like this. The key is F major, and we only have the F, B flat, and C major chords. It is hard to imagine a more simple progression. Now the blues is meant to be colourful, so I'm going to add one extra note to the chords to spice things up a little. To the F chord, I'll add a sixth, and to the B flat and C chords, I'll add a seventh. In classical terms, a seventh chord is a dominant seventh, and a dominant seventh needs to resolve to another chord. I'm happy for the B flat and C chords to resolve, but as F major is the tonic key, I'll add the more stable sixth rather than the dominant seventh. So let's voice these chords. And when voicing chords, it's important to know that the key notes, the ones that are the most important, are the third and the seventh notes. The third tells us if the chord is in a major or a minor key, and the seventh tells us if the chord is stable or needs to resolve to another chord. In effect, the third and the seventh notes of a chord propel the music forward. So they are the most important notes, and because of their importance, we build each chord on either the third or the seventh. Chord 1. It's an F6 chord. F6 does not have a seventh, so we build it on the third. We put an A at the base, and above that we have a C, which is the fifth, a D, which is the sixth note of the chord, and then of course we place the F on top. As is often the case, if we build a chord on the third, the next chord should be built on the seventh. This tends to work best when we alternate the lowest notes. It makes the chord movement much smoother. The seventh of B flat 7 is an A flat. Yes, it is an A flat because remember we are dealing with the dominant seventh, where the seventh is a minor seventh above the tonic. So we have an A flat, and above the A flat we have a B flat, then the D, and then on top the F. Having voiced these two chords, I then go ahead and voice every F6 and B flat 7 in the progression exactly the same way. I only have one more chord to voice, the C7, and it's in bar 9. So if I use the seventh, the B flat, as the lowest note, I get a B flat, and on top of that C, E, and G. We use another C7 chord in bar 12 if we want to get back to the beginning of the progression. So if the piece doesn't end at bar 12, we use a C7 to push the music forward to the next chorus. I now want to add some more colour to the progression, so I'll add a ninth to all the seventh chords. The B flat in B flat 7 or the C in C7 are not as important as you might think. They are generally sounded in the bass line already, and they provide no dissonance or colour to the chord. But if we take the tonic of the chord and raise it one step, we get a ninth. This is a far more colourful note that enriches our harmony. So here I raise the B flat to a C, creating a B flat 9 chord. And here at the C7 chord, I take the C and make it a D. I then go ahead and apply ninths to all the B flat 7 and C7 chords. Our next step towards building our blues progression is to add some cadential movement, or in other words, follow some of the movement of the circle of fifths. So what we want to do is create some seventh chords that resolve. In other words, I guess you could say we want to create some mini perfect cadences, some chords that act like the 5-to-1 perfect cadence. And here is a great example in bar 4. We can treat the F chord as chord 5 of B flat, the following chord, and F7 resolves to B flat. There's a trick I can do here at bar 5 and 6. Rather than have the B flat chord sounded in both bars, I can change the second one to a B diminished seventh. That might sound technical, but there really is only one note difference between a B flat 7 chord and a B diminished seventh, and that is a B natural in the second chord. So I'll change the second one to a B diminished seventh, and it just gives me a little bit of chromatic movement in the bass line. The next steps are a little more complex. I'm going to rework the harmonies in bars 8 to 12. So let's move the C7 to bar 10. Now if we work backwards from the C7, following the circle of fifths, I can put a G minor 7 in bar 9. And we can go back further. D7 resolves to G minor 7. And if I put two chords in bar 8, I can have A minor 7 resolving to D7. I'm simply following the circle of fifths, and working backwards can make the progression easier to see. Moving forward, I can use the same progression in bars 11 and 12, as the final C7 chord will lead back to the F6 at the beginning of the next chorus. So following the same circle of fifths, we have A minor 7, followed by D7, then G minor 7, and then C7. This all leads to F6 at the beginning of the next chorus. Having a look at our progression, you can see that it's become something a little bit more complex than the simple 3-chord progression we had at the beginning. I'm happy with the chordal structure, so let's now look at the individual chords and see if we can make them more colourful. You will recall earlier I said that the 3rd and the 7th determined the nature of the chord. So, these notes must remain as is. If we change them, we change the function of the chord. So when adding colour, we look to the 5th and the 9th. And here, in the second chord of bar 4, we can do a very cool thing. Let's raise the C a half step, making it a sharp 5. And the G also a half step, making it a sharp 9. Have a listen to this chord. The sharp 9 in particular gives us the quintessential blues flavour. I can now go ahead and raise the 5th and 9th degrees of all remaining 7th chords. Now let's hear the progression. There is only one more improvement I want to make to our progression. If you look at our writing in the treble line, you will note that the movement is very smooth. There are no large jumps, and most of the movement is by step. The bass line, however, tends to jump around quite a bit. This is not surprising when you think about it, because for much of the time we are following the circle of fifths. If we want to smooth the movement in the bass line, we need to use a technique called the tritone substitute. Yes, I know, it's a very technical sounding device, but it simply means that we can replace the bass notes of all 7th chords with a note a tritone away. A tritone is another word for augmented 4th or diminished 5th. So in bar 4, I can replace the F bass note of F7 with a C flat or B natural, whichever you prefer. In bar 8, the D bass note of D7 can come up a tritone to A flat. And in bar 10, the C bass note of C7 can be replaced with an F sharp. Look at the movement in the bass line now. It is as smooth and as flowing as the movement in the treble line. The blues is an excellent way to see how notes can be added to the chords to produce different colours. It also shows how the circle of fifths can be incorporated into a chord progression. But these techniques should not be limited to just the blues progression. Once mastered, try to include these techniques in all your writing, regardless of musical style or genre. So to recap, number 1, build chords on the 3rd or 7th degrees. These are the most important notes of the chords, and we need either to be at the base of the voicing. You will find that alternating between the 3rd and the 7th will often give you a smooth progression. Number 2, add ninths to your chords and produce additional colour by raising and or lowering the 5th and 9th degrees. Today we raised the 5th and 9th, but there are many more possibilities. Experiment with your chords and see what you can come up with. And finally, look to include some movement from the circle of fifths. This will give you more harmonic options, and once you are happy with your progression, use tritone substitutes to smooth the movement of the bass line. Working with the blues is fun, and it's a great way to improve your compositional technique. Become familiar with the progression and look to see how you can use these devices in all your compositions.